What's up, YouTube? This is Jonathan from Brothers and Cards. Hey, you know what? Every once in a while, it's fun to get on here and just talk a little bit of football. And a lot of you guys know I played quarterback in college. I tend to look at a lot of quarterback stats, but this year, some of the college stats coming out of our quarterbacks are so insane, I just had to share it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit you with my top 5 quarterbacks right now. And I want to let you know what I look at. I'm not a professional analyst or anything, but as a former quarterback in college, and as a fan, I like to look at different things, and I like to value some stats that people don't always value. So looking at the stuff that I really care about, I took way too much time today watching the games, looking at it. Right now it's halftime of the Georgia and Alabama game. And, some of those things, some of the stats that I looked at here have already been affected just from that game. So everything that I looked at was prior to Championship Saturday, so the whole regular season. And some of these facts are absolutely crazy. So some of the stats I do look at, and I know people hate hearing this, but strength of schedule to me is a big deal. Especially like when I look at rookies going into the draft, that's a big important thing for us to research as, a business that sells sports cards. We need to know like who we can kind of expect to do well and what teams are going to go with, if we're going to invest in those guys or not. Last year when we did this, we ranked our top 5 quarterbacks leading up to the draft, and Baker Mayfield was our number 1 by a long shot based on these exact same stats. So I think there is some truth to it, and I think strength of schedule has a huge component to that in relationship to completion percentage. Just these overall stats. Like last year, I know something that stood out to me so much with Baker was that he completed over 80% of his passes against Ohio State. And then he did a great job in the playoffs too. And I think if you can play at a high level against high competition, your chances of being successful in the NFL are even greater. And I'm going to get to why that's so crazy with these guys that I'm about to list off for you in a minute. But strength of schedule, completion percentage go hand in hand as far as when I look at guys and how successful they are going to be in the NFL. Another big one I look at is pass attempts. Not necessarily as a defining stat, but I feel like it is important. If you're completing 70% of your passes and you threw, let's see, how much did this guy throw? For the guy at Washington State, threw for 613 times. And he completed 70.6% of his passes. To me, that's more impressive than Tua completing 70% of his passes, throwing 269 times. So those things you got to kind of factor in, along with strength of schedule. Another big one I look at too, and this is like the most NFL-ready stat in my opinion, is sacks per attempts. A lot of times rookies get in the NFL and they're sacked, and that's a huge issue. What amazes me is how few some of these guys have been sacked. Going into today, Tua had been sacked twice this whole year. Twice. And that's incredible to me. But yeah, the sacks versus attempts and that percentage is a super important stat to me. Then touchdown to interception ratio. This was one that, as a player, I didn't really care about that much. It was kind of like, to me, each one of those passes were an individual basis. So I could have a year where I had however many touchdowns then and few interceptions the next year different. There's a lot of factors that go in. I mean, you could throw a 5-yard throw that a dude takes 80 yards, and that's really all a receiver, but ends up being a touchdown. And then, you could play it safe and you could have a guy bobble it and get picked. So I always hated as a player the touchdown to interception ratio, but as a coach and then as a fan and how I view it now, it kind of tells you, how aggressive and how, precise the relationship between them, because I feel like you could just ding, throw hitches all day long and never take a chance, and your touchdown to interception ratio isn't going to be that great because you're not going to have as many touchdowns, even if you don't have as many interceptions. So to see the difference between some of these guys, it's crazy. But that was an important stat I felt like to bring in here. Also, I don't think, like I said, I'm not a professional analyst, so I really value the QBR rankings. The quarterback efficiency, I use the ESPN QBR, but I feel like that's a really important tool to use. So what I did when I ranked these quarterbacks, is I took the top 20 based on completion percentage. There was kind of a big drop-off, in my opinion, from those top 20 guys to the next 20. So I looked at those top 20 guys, and then I narrowed it down to 14 based on different outliers, maybe this team's strength of schedule was literally the easiest schedule in the world. or maybe, their touchdown to interception ratio was so bad, or maybe they got sacked just like way too many times, or maybe they just ranked really poorly against all these other guys and all the stats. So I narrowed it down to 14. And my top I'll give you the top quarterback in each category first. When it came to strength of schedule, Stanford's quarterback, KJ Costello, out of these 14 quarterbacks, played the hardest schedule. Second was David Blough from Purdue. He played out of these 14 quarterbacks. Stanford was ranked 17th on strength of schedule. Purdue was ranked 32nd. Georgia was ranked 33rd. Alabama 35th. And Texas Tech 41st. So there's the top 5 strength schedules. As far as quantity of pass attempts, this was pretty bonkers, the discrepancies here. Gardner Minshew from Washington State, playing for Coach Leach out there, he threw the ball 613 times. And out of this list of 14 guys, he had the highest completion percentage. 70.6% of those 613 passes were completed. That is amazing. That is amazing. I use this all the time as a joke, not trying to offend anybody, but if the average person were to take a football and go out in the backyard and stand about 20 yards apart and throw it to each other 20 times, it's really not that easy to complete 70% of those. So like, as silly as it sounds, he's doing this against Division I athletes. 613 passes, he completed 70.6% of them. That's incredible to me, and it deserves recommending or acknowledging. Dwayne Haskins is second in completion attempts, and that is 455 of them. He's completed 69%. David Blough from Purdue has attempted 425 passes. He's completed 66.6% of them. Brett Ripien, I don't know how to say his name, sorry, I should have looked that up. He attempted 416 passes and has completed 68.8% of them. Ryan Finley from North Carolina State, who I like him a lot, he's attempted 408 passes to complete 67.4% of them. Will Greer's right up there near the 400 mark too. He completed 397 of them, or he attempted 397 passes, and he completed, let me make sure I got that right, 67% of them. So a lot of these guys are right there near that 70% mark, which is just incredible in passing and completion percentage. But there's just a lot of attempts too. What's also crazy to me is 2 guys that I have in my top 5 had the least amount of attempts, and that was Jake Fromm had the least out of this group of 14. He attempted 233 passes, completing 69.1% of them, and Tua Tagovailoa attempted 269 passes, completing 70.3% of them. I know he had some injuries there, a little bit dinged up here and there. Ian Book, another guy from Notre Dame, he attempted 280 passes, completing 70.4% of them, which is fantastic. I know the only thing I have against Ian Book, and the only reason I almost took him off the list, was because Notre Dame's strength of schedule was not great, and Michigan, probably the best team they played, or one of the best teams they played, Ian Book did not play in that game. So I left him on the list because the statistics are incredible, but he didn't play against Michigan, and I feel like those would have dinged the rest of his stats a little bit. But nonetheless, completing 70.4% of your passes against Division I athletes is incredible. So when we look at sacks, I was pretty impressed by this. Tua has been, like I said earlier, he's been sacked twice. Leading up to today, he's got sacked once, maybe even twice in this game already in the first half against Georgia, which is crazy because he's only been sacked twice in the first 12 games of the season with 269 pass attempts. The one that stands out even crazier than this to me is when I look at the percentage of sacks versus attempts, is Gardner Minshew from Washington State. He threw the ball 613 times. He's only been sacked 11 times. 1.8% of the times he goes back there, he gets sacked. As a coach, this is a guy that's going to protect the ball. This is a guy that's going to get rid of the ball. And he's a guy that's not going to, put you in a bunch of second 15 situations. So I don't hear a lot of talk about Gardner Minshew when we're talking about the NFL, when we're talking about draft day. But, he's a guy kind of like Mason Rudolph was last year, where the statistics are in his favor. And says that he can do some decent work. And again, Washington State, out of this group here was ranked 9th in the strength of schedule. So it's not like they had in the whole league or in the whole college, out of the 200 and some teams, they were 60th on the strength of schedule. So it's not like he's playing against nobodies. I'm impressed by his stats here. When we look at touchdown to interception ratio, let's see here. First, we have Tua, 36 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And again, he just threw one against Georgia in the first half here. So, that stat could be flawed a little bit in that regards. Let's see here. We've got 24 touchdowns to 3 interceptions from Fresno State quarterback Marcus McMaryion. That's impressive. That's super impressive. Fresno State, again, not somebody that I look at as like they have a hard schedule. In fact, on this list, they have the easiest schedule out of these 14 quarterbacks. But he still completed 70.5% of his passes with a 24-3 touchdown interception ratio. That is incredible to me. Dwayne Haskins, he's got 42 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. Incredible. Let's see here. Oh, Trevor Lawrence making the list here with this great stat of 22 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. I'm impressed. And then Kyler Murray, who I'm extremely impressed with, is going to have a touchdown interception ratio of 37-7. Again, this is not including the stats from Championship Saturday. This is the regular season up until now. Then the last stat, ESPN quarterback rankings. Again, I'm not saying that I'm smarter than anybody else, so I value these very much. Tua was first on that list. Kyler Murray is second. Jake Fromm, third. Will Grier, fourth. And Dwayne Haskins, fifth, according to ESPN QBR. So that's pretty close to my top 5, but it is pretty different as well. So Tua is my number 1. And what I did here is I took all the stats and I divided them. I found the average, but I did count strength of schedule twice, completion percentage twice, and QBR twice. So those 3 doubled up on importance when I found this average. But when I found the average, this is how they ranked out in my calculations here, which say what you want about them. It's just me sharing how I love football and how my mind works on this. And again, like I said, I put way too much work into this. But I've got Tua at number 1, Dwayne Haskins from Ohio State at number 2, Kyler Murray from Oklahoma as my 3rd, and this is based on statistics, Jake Fromm 4th. What's wild is the guys that lead in those categories, my top 4, none of them are going to be in the NFL draft this coming spring. None of them. Tua, true sophomore. Dwayne Haskins, true sophomore. Kyler Murray, going to the Oakland A's. He's going to play baseball. Jake Fromm, true sophomore. Now, Gardner Minshew, he's my 5th guy. And again, Washington State, who cares? Mike Leake's crazy. I get it. But statistically, he is absolutely ahead of everybody else. He is my 5th quarterback from Washington State, Gardner Minshew. Again, it's just super impressive. Some of the stuff you can't ignore. Now, I will say that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is extremely close between him and, based on these stats, it's extremely close between him and Marcus McMaryion from Fresno State and Will Grier from West Virginia. I've liked Will Grier all year. I think he's the guy that's going to get, top quarterback attention as we look in the draft. But definitely those top 5 guys, I'm so impressed with them this year. I know we talked about, Andy was like, hey, what about Herbert from Oregon? Hey, listen, he's completed less than 60% of his passes, which puts him 70th in rankings across the whole country. And I know that's not, the most important stat, but I don't see him over there at Oregon having the kind of schedule that a lot of these other teams have, so he didn't make this list. To run through the rest of the list, like I said, Minshew was 5th. McMaryion from Fresno State was 6th. Will Grier was 7th from West Virginia. Ian Book, based on these stats. And again, I hate that he didn't play against Michigan. I would love to see what he did. But I've got him as 8th. KJ Costello from Stanford is 9th. Alan Bowman from Texas Tech, who I kept trying to get him off this list, but statistically he's just been there. He's my 10th quarterback. David Blau from Purdue is 11th. Brett Ripien, I should have looked it up, from Boise State is my 12th. Ryan Finley from North Carolina State. I really like Ryan Finley. I really like him a lot. Is 13th. And then Trevor Lawrence. Again, I kind of wanted to take him off. I know he plays at Clemson. He's got phenomenal talent around him. But he statistically he deserves to be on this list. So Trevor Lawrence is my 14th quarterback, and I stopped it right there because I took everybody else off based on outliers. But yeah, hey, listen. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear your opinions. Tell me what you think. Tell me who should be on this list and why. Tell me if you think any of these stats are flawed. I would love to debate about this a little bit. And, you know, I think this is kind of a good way to look at it. It's my own thing. I haven't really, like, you know, asked about this for any other people. It's just kind of how I think. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. Put them in the comments. Thanks.